All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Story Studio podcast. We're doing another in our State of the Industry series. And today we're welcoming back an old friend, Michael Anderle, who some of you may have heard of. Now, we've known Michael for a while. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years.
I can tell you the moment we met. Oh, unless Michael wants to tell this story, I'd love to hear the story.
No, I'd love to hear. Well, actually, I'd love to hear yours, but I can say that it was in Austin, just sheer 100 and something days after I released my first book at Smarter Artists.
Yeah, it was. I guess was that 2014?
No,
I want to say it was
2016.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that was a fun one because it was like, hey, here, teach me stuff. Okay, now I'm beyond you, so maybe I can teach you some shit. So yeah, this should be a really cool episode. We haven't caught up in a while, and I'm sure that some things have changed. Yeah, it's been. I mean, we've talked on and off. I know that we dragged you, several miles on foot in sweltering heat in Florida to pick your brain at some point.
Oh, that was fun. Okay,
it was, and Sean kept saying, just a little further, just a little further.
Well, yeah, that part.
I thought it's right there. I saw a Mexican restaurant, I swear, but it was like 9 miles away, and we were all soaked through our shirts. So that was fun. But yeah, the first time we met Michael was at our first event before we stopped doing them. Which, one of the reasons.
Good timing, man.
Great timing, because like what Michael's built, really not only took the place, it 10x what we were doing. It did it better, it did it smarter, it did it more cost effectively. But the very first time we met Michael, he was at Smart Artist Summit, and Michael Anderle was not Michael Anderle yet. I never heard his name, and I didn't know who he was.
It was Michael Anderle.
I just knew he needed a ride. So I was there to get Dave.
He wasn't even at our event. He was just some guy. Yeah, you look like you need a ride.
Dave was...
he had to do that 100 times before he got one who was into publishing.
Dave, we were there to pick up Dave, and Michael was staying at the same place as Dave. And so there was a whole, there were these little shuttles that were going, because we were real smart the first year and didn't do it at a hotel. We just did it at this cool spot called VUCA. And so there were shuttles that went, from
cool spot with one bathroom.
Okay, Dave hated that, actually. But it was a cool spot.
Not because he couldn't get the bathroom, but because when he was in there, everybody was listening to him and waiting outside.
Oh, you also had to wait in line.
You didn't have to wait in line. Everybody let Dave go first.
And Dave was thinking of the first person in line the whole time. Don't pretend like you waited in a
single line.
I wanted the line to be gone. I don't want a line of people outside the toilet I'm in.
And then when they come in after you.
Anyway, we were going back to the hotel, and all the shuttles were full, and there was somebody who was like couldn't fit on that shuttle who needed a ride, and that was Michael. And so he got to see us, are you like, married threesome, all the way back. And we really were bickering. Dave's bitching about my driving. Johnny thinks it's all hilarious. It was a really wonderful first introduction to Michael, because I think we all just saw each other as humans. And
you weren't the three gods that we all assume you are.
We were just, it was very easy. And I like how many, Michael has a really inquisitiveness about him. He just has a lot of questions. And one time when Michael, we had a little closed door event one time, and I said something that I found out later really offended Michael. And
it offended me to a very large income level.
Well, I'm glad.
It offended you in exactly the right way. Somebody offend me that way.
I said something that I didn't even mean as challenging, but it was taken as challenging. And what I was trying, it is a true compliment. It was that Michael was saying, hey, here's a basic strategy that will kind of work for everybody. And I'm like, dude, you don't realize that you're a unicorn, because I think Michael is able to see like the long-term picture and just really able to see kind of a bird's eye view that most people are not able to. Most writers do not think like business people. And even within the community of business-minded writers, which I think that's changed a lot in the last few years, there is more of a migration towards business-minded thinking. And I think we had something to do with that. Michael certainly has something to do with that. Mark Dawson's had a lot to do with that. So there is a movement to be more business-minded, but even then, Michael's ideation operates at a totally different scale. And so I've suffered this in my life many times, the thinking that people can think the way I'm thinking, or that they can read my mind. And, it's a joke in the company that I'll just say a bunch of things and assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about. And they don't. And
if you ever want to try to read Sean's mind, just give a ferret meth and you'll have a close approximation.
So I do understand that, but to me, Michael operates at a different level. It doesn't mean that people can't accomplish what he can accomplish, but it's not a blueprint scenario. There's too much heart and thinking and just stuff that goes into Michael. So anyway, that's all to say that there's a lot of successful people in indie publishing, but there's no one quite like Michael. And he also, I think, taught us a really valuable lesson that it took, the three of us. Actually, I'm going to say Dave knew this lesson right away. It was me and Johnny that needed to learn it, and mostly me. But it's, from the very beginning, Michael's always been very generous with his knowledge and sharing. And, we in the early days of the podcast, we really tried to do that too. And when we first held our event and we first started to try to, scale the nonfiction side of the business, it felt like we were doing the right things. It felt like we were doing it the way it was supposed to be done. But Michael did it better than us. He basically said, I'm not charging anyone for anything ever. And the reason is because then I'm indebted. And I'd rather just do it and then not ever feel indebted. And, it took us a long way around. That's where we are now. We're doing very much the same thing as Michael, where we're, behind the scenes in the lab, making product to sell and sharing as much as we can, as generously as we can, without charging for it. So Michael, thank you for being just such a bright, shining beacon in the indie publishing space, and always being so generous with your time and your knowledge and everything else. You're a prince among men, and welcome to the show.
Did you ever know that you're my hero?
Well, with that sort of introduction, I think that we should probably go ahead and just close it now, because it can only go downhill. It's one of those things, that proverb that says, let everyone think that you're an idiot. Don't open your mouth and prove it.
We can just glide to the finish line right now. So, Michael, where can people find you?
Well, wait. Okay. Well, yeah. So first of all, who the hell are you, right? No. So for anybody that's listening, I could give an outdated description of what you do, but you're always doing different stuff. So do you want to give us sort of your intro in a nutshell, because we're too lazy to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I support. So I was, just real quick before he gets off on I was shaking my head when you said that Dave knew it, thinking you were going one direction, Sean, and then you pivoted and went left, and I realized that my head shaking was like, oh, what a dick move. And so what I thought Dave was on track on is like, let's focus on the writing, folks. Let's get the series done. Let's do this, and it's versus a sporadic, let's do it all. And then you're like, and then we did this, and I'm like, oh, that was the wrong time to shake my head.
No, but that's a really good point too, because our focus was all over the place for many years. But I think for the company we have now, that was actually a good thing. We learned to do all the things we learned to do. We learned what we didn't want, and we learned what's really important, which is story. Like, we just want to tell stories over and over and over. I think it was our third summit. You stood up there very proudly and said, I am a pulp fiction writer, and this is what I do, and this is so much fun, and I'm just connecting with readers. And that's what it's all about. Like, tell stories, tell them in a way that makes people love you, and do it over and over. And make money. Yes.
That'd be the second part of that. Going back to Johnny's question, what are we doing now? And the answer to that is a little bit bigger. So I started out as an indie author, released 3 books in November of 2015, 1 in December, 1 in January, and been at 5 figures per month until September of 2016, where I was at 6 figures a month. And so, just general income has gone up from there. So then, over time, 2016, I did a lot of collaborations. That's when Cortherian Gambit was getting big. And so by 2017, a lot of people, I say a lot, there's a fair amount of people believed, okay, that's the model. We need to go and create universes and have everyone jump in. And when I heard that one time in a conversation up in New York, I realized, I'm like, I don't know that they understand just how much money we had to invest in this, and there's people who are going to be doing these universes not realizing what the cash flow challenges are. I made in the second universe, or Saren, I made a $25,000 art mistake by choosing the wrong person and going down this path and finally realizing I got to scrap it all. I don't know that we used 3 pieces of art out of all of that.
When do you decide, like how deep do you get in? Because you don't seem like somebody who would suffer sunk cost fallacy. Like once you realize, like, I mean, a little bit, but then you pull back. So when do you know?
That one, talking about learnings, I'm very personal into that. Like if I give my word that this is where I'm going to go and this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to support it, even if it means that I'm going to eat money. And I promised this artist in my largesse, and what I would really translate that is my ignorance, that I would support this art effort for 6 months, even though 2 months in, I'm like, oh, we are totally screwed unless we can figure something out.
So it became a matter of like, that's my word. I gave my word.
Yes,
Yeah, I
that's
totally
exactly what it did. So, but going from there, the challenges with collaborations became evident after a year, not only the challenges related to working with certain individuals, but also and how our personalities clash, but also just, well, I think that's actually kind of the main one, but scaling it, how do you scale that? You can't just double the collaborators and double the income because you're probably going to quadruple the problems. And so quadrupling the problems doesn't scale worth a damn, at least certainly not to me. So I started going down the path of like, okay, so what do I do personally well? I create characters better. I create um, the beats. Really, we could go, how much have we talked about that in the past, but creating beats better. And then I would pull behind in some of my products, I would pull ghostwriters, so to speak, creative collaborators to help fill out some of these things. And so now we have a situation where I'm writing beats, I'm collaborating with people. And because of the infrastructure of how I am really impatient when it comes out, when my story is done on Monday, I want it released Friday. And so, I had built an editing infrastructure and a JIT effort based on that, and it became something that was an advantage for the company. During this time back in like 2017, I had recognized that there's a very low barrier to entry into our industry. Pretty much if you have a laptop, it's out there. Hell, we gave away the information how to get $67,000 your first month. I had a wonderful couple in Edinburgh at a 20 Books event come up and say, thank you so much. Because of this, we did 67,000 in our first month. And I'm like, part of me is like, that is fantastic. And the other part of me is, but you beat my record. What? And so that was one of those little dichotomies of just ego, right? Wanting to be that guy. And it took me a few years to kind of pull back. And as y'all might remember, I had a couple of rants that I did back in 2017, 2016, and recognizing that as the company grew, I had to pull back. And it's not only from the standpoint of me recognizing it, it was my wife beating me on the head. You need to pull back. This is not the appropriate way. Maybe that was cute when you were just solo guy, but now you have people that depend on you. And that wasn't anywhere I wanted to go when I originally started it. I didn't ever want to feel like I was responsible for a bunch of people. But as I matured and as the company matured, it became evident that that's how people are looking at it. And, I'm thankful that I'm this old, so to speak. I'm 52 now, started back when I was 47 and had a lot of life behind me. And then COVID hit. And COVID all of a sudden started making me think, okay, how do you help solve the world's problems? Which was a bit stressful for me. I think all of us as creatives take on more than maybe perhaps we should. And if you're not educated and taught that you can't take on the world's monkey, that you'll go through it. And so finally, in order for me just to survive the mental anguish of what's going on, I realized the best I could do, the most I could do, is try to make sure this company, who had, I would say, easily 100 plus family members, people, 1 to 200 in there, kind of dependent on the company. And that's something I could affect. And so to answer your question, Johnny, we are a publishing company. We put out anywhere from 18 to 30 titles a month. We put out, or we usually sell anywhere from 10 to 50 audio licenses every quarter. We did 220 audiobooks ourselves. We've got 280 that we've licensed. So we've got pretty much 500 licensed. We have over 800 titles in our backlist, and we grow at about 200 a year.
What's your determining factor on what you license for audio versus what you produce yourself?
When you get to the size of publisher, you recognize that audio, unless you are willing to build the marketing infrastructure necessary, because it's not the same as a book, you can turn that money around and it becomes no different than a can of corn on the shelf. If you guys can speak to how much does it cost to produce a book, time, effort, money, and start it, let's say it's January 1, right? And we can either do this exercise or y'all can go away and do it, but January 1, you start that process and you start investing time, which is money, either real money because you paid someone to help it, or it's opportunity lost because you could have been focused on something else. If you go through the process, and I'm just going to take it, let's say it's from a work for hire opportunity, right? And the book is going to cost $5,000 to grab a relatively decent number out of the air. So at $5,000, if you say it's going to take 2 months to build it, right? So that's 2,500 you do in January, 2,500 you do in February. Now you got nothing back for this. So now you got editing and cover and blurb and all of those things that you're going to do. So let's say it takes you another 30 days for the sake of argument to get it prepped, and you're going to release it on month 3, day 1. At that point, you now have invested $5,000, which is sitting there gone from your account. You have to look at that as opportunity loss from a financial standpoint. Now, Amazon is going to take 30 days and you're going to sell that. Now, you're not going to get that money for 60 days further. So when you started the process January 1, usually the best you can hope for, unless you decrease your manufacturing time, and I can hear the creatives yelling at me already, how dare you put manufacturing terms to a literary art effort? I'm like, well, then go back to
That's
pulp.
why you're making all the money.
Well, it's also go back to pulp. Charles Dickens was practically a work for hire person. He wrote serials. Go back to your history. And that's where I would probably have this same argument of literary versus pulp has been going on since before 1900.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
go back and it's just like, it's fascinating. Go read the James Scott Bell book about it. It's like book number 10 in this series. But
Yeah, I was just watching Dickinson on Apple, which it's kind of quirky because they modernize it, but it is Emily Dickinson. It does take place in 1800s, but they say things like, they don't exactly dab, but they may as well. Like that's that kind of show. And but they were all reading Dickens, and they were just waiting for it to get off the boat, and they're talking about it like you would talk about a trashy CW show, not like HBO or high art. Like it wasn't that.
No, and some of the other ones that we talked today as being classics were all pulp fiction.
Yeah.
But so I digress a little bit on that one. But the point was that at June is what? So April, May, June. So June is 30 days, right? So July 1, basically 2 days before that, you've received money from something you invested starting in January. And that's a decent speed. You can do it but faster. I know that. We've done it. You can do it slower. God knows I've done that too. But if you go audio, now expand that. A typical average audio income is 18 months. So if I can take what's called a turn, right? So if I invest $5,000, 6 months later, I have all of that money starting to come in to start paying off another one. At a minimum, I've done 3 turns with that $5,000 versus 1 turn with my audio, and it's not going to be as quick. So, that when I say we've done over 220 books, we did, but part of that was because A, I didn't know any better. B, I thought it was a tax deferment plan. I'll just put this much money into these particular audio products because I had no other way to build a business at the time, but move the money somewhere. So I realized, well, if I invested it, that's going to reduce my taxes. I'll get the income later, maybe next year. I should have said maybe next year, maybe 3 years from now. And then, so I looked at it from that way. So a lot of times when I talk to people who are truly in the publishing side of things, they're building that company. I go, you realize you end up becoming a financing company, right? It's like, don't even get me started on ads. because you could effectively create a company out of nothing but an ad revenue base. And that's, I know people who do it. You can do it yourselves. You guys can obviously do it and probably are doing it. But you look at it from the standpoint of, you know, that your income comes back 90 days later. You start your ads January 1. You have your expense all the way at the end of January, and don't forget to add your operational overhead to that cost. And then you get the money back in 60 days. If you have the funds, you self-fund it, and then where you don't have the interest, or you pay yourself the interest. Otherwise, you fund it with a credit card. And so long as your ad spend is good enough and you own the product, you're getting that 70% of the gross. And so once again, it becomes a mathematical decision based on just business.
So okay. So this question was about audio, like which ones do you decide? I'm going to license this, and I'm going to.
The answer is
this.
we pretty much always go to licensing now.
Because then they have the burden, they have the traffic, they have all of that stuff. So is there a reason why you would want to do one on your own, or is that almost just a disruption at this point? Is it?
Good question. So Truth Theory and Gambit was the primary series that created the company, and our audio returned it within 30 days. We've always paid off our audio, and that's the one that screwed me in the beginning, because I assumed, well, all audio was like that.
Right.
Not true.
Okay.
But to answer your question, no, it would have to be something really special that we believed in, and someone is not, they're not giving us a big enough advance, because
But that's pretty rare at this time, because you already have the relationships for the licensing, and anything that's performing, they're going to want it. And if you did have something that they didn't want, you'd have to, like, you're too business minded. You'd be like, well, why don't they want it?
Right? Well, we would still do it. We have all of the contacts and everything for us to do it. We have all of the talent that we need to do it. So I would still do it, just because I'd partially get it out there for the fans. But to your point now, Judith has sold licenses, and we had Podium before Judith really got involved, but Podium has done stuff. So we got RB Media, which is also recorded books, graphic audio, Dreamscape, Tantor. There's a guy out in Houston that's brand new that we're looking to close. So that's 6 right there. And when you look at it, it's like, if you presume that your money is going to take 18 months to get back, now obviously you got ones that are last 2, 3, 4, and an amazing amount of money. But if that money now funds new books, and that turn is 3 times, it just becomes a math, unless you prefer to do it. Otherwise, it's a math exercise.
Is there anything else that you're looking to license? Like, do you want to get into video games, graphic novels, film, television, any of that stuff?
So we've done an agreement with a gentleman out in Switzerland for one of our products. So he's shopping that. And nobody gets a license to any of our stuff without putting money down. If you have no skin in the game, we're not interested in talking with you. And that actually comes from, believe it or not, Christine Catherine Rush. We had lunch with her and her husband, which was funny because why is his name escaping me? Dean Wesley Smith, right? So thank you, Johnny. I think you were about to jump in on that.
I was just about to say it, beat me to it.
So what happened is, so a couple years ago, Christine had an article about a rights fair here in Vegas. And I sent it to Judith, and that was it. That was out of my mind. About 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, I get this comment from Judith about, hey, we're going to go have lunch with that lady and her husband. And I'm like, what lady? She's like, I'm like, Christine Catherine Rush? She's like, yeah, her. And her husband's going to come along. I'm like, so sweetheart, what you're telling me is that you and I are going to go have lunch with Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith, and Dean and I are the plus ones. Just want to clear this, and you really don't know who they are. Yeah, she had that thing, and it was really great. Judith is not afraid to go out and just ask anyone anything. So I thought that was particularly funny. But one thing Chris said that was, she has, licensed the rights to her stories and stuff many, many times, but she looks at no one unless they're willing to put money down first. And that struck a nerve in Judith, and she ran with it. I don't even know what question I thought I was answering with that.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense because I mean, we found the same thing. There are a lot of tire kickers in this business, a lot. And there's also a lot of people who are looking at what's happening in the indie space and bargain shopping. Like they're, what can I acquire that I don't actually have to pay for? And then I'm going to go in with my big money bags, or not bags, but satchels full of ideas. And what was that? What was it called, Johnny? The first one we went to in LA, the one that smelled like desperation.
AFM, American Film Market.
Yeah, where people are just like, you've got producers who are looking to scoop something up for nothing, and you've got people who are just so hungry to sell anything.
It was like the world's largest flea market. That's kind of the way it felt. I'm sure that there were plenty of people who had, I mean, I don't want to disparage anything that I don't want to talk out of my ass. I'm sure that there was a lot of people who, had, say, interest ahead of time and were maybe handling things a little bit. But there was a lot of, like, the feel was a little bit like being on the floor of the commodities exchange or something, I got a deal over here. Okay. And then people are trying to pick them up cheap. That's kind of the way it felt. And it did feel a little desperate, but
it did feel desperate
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's actually excellent advice, because options don't have to cost a lot, but they do prove that there's skin in the game. And, we do get a lot of questions. Hey, is this available? Or we've actually got a lot of people who are like, in fact, we were just talking about this one last week. We were on a call where somebody who very seriously thought we would do this. Hey, Will, they were asking Johnny and I if we would write a script for a specific project, so that they could go shop it, but they weren't willing to option it. And it's like, if we wanted to take the time to write the script, we actually have contacts. We don't need you to go do this for us. So it does seem like an area where people want to see what they can do without putting their money out. And to your point, Michael,
how can I exploit a desperate indie author?
Yeah.
Let me count the ways. 1, 2, ego, 4.
Right. And Johnny and I heard this advice. I don't even know who said it. It was a while ago, but I just love it. I've never forgot it. Enthusiasm is free. And, Hollywood is so good at enthusiasm. You get on the phone with anybody who works in that town, and they will make you feel really amazing and fill you up with promises of what it could be as watching your stuff on TV. And it is such a long, involved process. We have a couple of things that have been optioned, and we're still not watching our shit on anything.
You'll be the belle of the ball, darling.
Yeah, it is. Even when things are green, we have one project that's been green lights go, and it's still not in production yet. So, you absolutely do need to be wary. And I love that, Michael, where, like, if they're not actually optioning it, then it's not a real conversation.
Yeah.
So I have a question it's a pivot, and it moves us back to sort of the beginning of the conversation, but I do want to, I think it's kind of important. So you mentioned that a lot of people started watching what you were doing and said, okay, well, this is what I need to do. I need to make a big shared universe, and they don't, understand how much investment and management. So what of what you've done would you say is sort of the bigger lesson that people could take away from? What is sort of the keys that you've noticed to success that maybe don't entail, like, build a whole universe?
Well, that's a really good question. So I believe with my heart that if you know how to be successful as you, right, that you can mimic you a lot easier than you can build a company. For instance, the Criterion Gambit was $1 million plus operation. And after doing collaborations, typically speaking, collaborations and universes are not going to generate near 100% of the value of the original. You'll get some that are really solid, half maybe, to some degree that could do it. And then those that are not, because the fans just don't follow. They love that first character, and perhaps for whatever emotional reasons, they're just not willing to move forward. I think that to know, the situations of know thyself publisher. Are you willing to work with other people? Are you willing to have them believe that their character needs to be more powerful than your character, who is the foundation cornerstone of your universe, and getting through those arguments? Are you willing to have the conversations that can take you through the night and have what, you know, for me as a personality, I don't like conflict. So are you ready to be in conflict with people? And you go, why? Well, you know, well, because those artists, those creatives also have a large desire to feel connected with their character, and they don't like their character sublimating to another one. And I think that going, you know, to your question, what do I think? Can you clarify that question again? Because I think I took it off on a tangent.
Well, just that, because I can see this exactly, because we've had some version of this ourselves. So in our case, it was, for instance, oh, you need to write serials that are X length, and can you guys please clarify me for exactly what the formula is for what kind of serials to write and how long and all that stuff.
How many words are in a serial, John?
How many words are in a serial? And it's, so I'm relating to that a little bit in what I'm imagining your shoes are, where people are like, only it's bigger, right? So like writing a serial isn't necessarily cost intensive. It may not be right for you, whatever, but it's not like you need to spend a lot of money and time and whatever. But if you're, you know, creating the huge Catherian Gambit universe, you're inviting all these people in, you know, we've gotten a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes as to how you guys work, and it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of accounting and stuff. And so people are looking at that and going, well, I should do that. And you're like, well, no. So what should you do? What is the lesson?
Cocaine.
Yeah, everyone wants a recipe. I want a recipe for success. I'm like, yeah, keep working hard. There's a recipe. Do a little better next time. If there's anything I would say that is like, okay, this is the close, and I have to relearn this. I have a huge page. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was. And I started putting down, what are the things I learned 5 years ago that I've forgotten since then I'm not put into practice, because the new bright shiny fourth generation down has confused me to what the core is. And the core, Johnny, to me is characters you care about, characters that you want to live with again and again, and you wish they were on your couch eating popcorn with you as you just watched a show. The thrill of the plot isn't what causes you want to be there. And I think there's enough times I've read articles about it where people were semi-successful, but then they created a character that the fans cared about inside everything else they were already doing, and now they wanted to come back, and now they moved up. So if you have a series that is growing, so you do trilogies. By the way, I used to do much larger. We generally speaking do trilogies now, 1, 2, 3. And it's growing. It's growing. The fans are getting more excited.
Is that just
now
the math that determine that trilogies are just more profitable than 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever?
Yeah. So part of, and we can go off on that one too. That's a good learning point on my side. But you go 1, 2, 3. So I typically will create a 9-book trilogy of trilogies concept, break them down into 3, and then do the first 3. If they're powerful, we already know where we're going with 4, 5, 6. If that's still working, we go 7, 8, 9. Generally speaking,
I like that idea a lot.
We stop.
Is the end of 3 a natural breaking off point? If it doesn't do well, then
Yes.
people are satisfied.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like what we always talk about. We do the same thing with where we'll write one book, and it's not a trilogy. It's just one book, and then okay, it has a satisfying ending. It's done, but it could go on and on and on if it works out.
So in doing the rapid release strategy, which we fell into, we didn't create it or anything, but following that, we've it seems to me like there's a really good way Amazon helps you with marketing when you've released those 3. I don't know how many people realize or have heard the story about whenever I released book 4 in Arthurian Gambit, it seemed to just jump. And it happened to coincide when I started advertising on Facebook. So for months and a lot of money, I assumed Facebook was driving this, not realizing that at book 4, Amazon had apparently done one of those emails for me to get people excited about this series. And so, you had this opportunity because Amazon's going to promote things that sell. They don't care what it's about. They don't care if it's a widget. They don't care if it's a book. Is it selling? If you get 100 people on that page and 20 of them buy it, that is a hell of a lot better than 100 people and 12 buy it. It will then promote the 20. Because one of the things I feel, this is very subjective at this moment, but I feel Amazon is also about just making sure people are having a great experience and buying. If it's kind of like gambling. If I can get you to Amazon and buy something, the reticence to buy something from me next time is less. I'm going to encourage that. Does that make sense? I mean, we're going off into an esoteric
Yeah, no, of
concept
course.
here. And so, from that standpoint, when I released book 4, but I started Facebook advertising, I thought it was all Facebook. I thought I'd just get it awareness and it's done. When you do trilogies versus one book, you lose that opportunity because that first one had better effing hit. Nothing sells the first book like the latest book, because book 2 comes out and people, maybe that cover really grabbed them. And they see that cover and then like, that's book 2. I'm going back to book 1. I'm starting there. So you never know exactly what part of your marketing mix is actually moving the books, but we do have things that are concrete. In a series that's working, the latest book will always call book 1 to go up, which causes it to be seen. Amazon supports this stuff, and they go on.
What period of time are you releasing books 1, book 2, and 3, and then how long do you wait before you start 4, 5, 6?
Well, we spent a lot of money thinking that we needed to go to 8 books. So we would go into production on 8. This is when we did quads, not trilogies. And I can tell you that was very expensive. And the only way we've made our money back on those is box sets. So the amount of time is we would do the trilogies. Typically speaking, if you look at your charts for a book, you will find a natural amount of days between when you release and when the apogee of those sales. Typically for us, it's 12 days. At least it was the last time I looked, which has actually been a little while, but 12 to 14 days. So from us, my go-to amount would be release 1 week later, we would release 2. So we had 2 in the series, and then we would go to 2 weeks. So total of 3 for a trilogy, if that makes sense. And then, we would be trying to push it. If we don't have the reviews aren't coming back happy, we're not seeing a whole bunch. Now, 3 weeks, honestly, is not enough to get a 4th book out. So you'd better have, to some degree, a JIT, a beta readership that's giving you feedback to maybe make a go, no-go decision earlier. If you question it, or it's a no, you don't go forward. But if people are just on it and they're like, this is fantastic, then maybe you want to start that thing on the guess. It's kind of like a spec home. Book 4 is a spec home. You're expecting it, and so you do that second trilogy.
Wait, did you say you released 3 books over 3 weeks?
Yes.
And so, what's the period of time between the 3rd and 4th?
That depends on your beta. I mean, can you get either you as an individual, because if your fans, a little bit of background, I'm a massive reader. I kind of coined the term whale reader to talk about me because I would read up to 3 to 4 books a weekend, having no knowledge of what romance people did at the time who were Kraken readers. But I am my target market. I wrote books. Criterion Gambit was something I wanted to read. So I have a strong belief that if I love this series, I'm willing to put my money, time, and effort behind it because I'm my only, readership of 1. Now, outside of that, as we get bigger, and as you guys are understanding, I'm sure, you need to go into markets that aren't about you. So who do you get that has that gut feeling? We have our beta teams, and those beta teams are broken up by universes and by genres in order to be able to help support that. And you start getting the flavor of their personalities. Like this team, when they're hot on something, probably should listen to it, possibly go ahead and get book 4 going. And if you were going to release book 4, it's probably 21 days after book 3. So, and then you would go to 28 days, and you'd probably leave it at 28 days and to the best of your ability, right? So that's a really difficult method to do. So in talking with a friend, we went with a concept called mega books. So a little bit of questioning. There's a friction, right? So you guys, especially Sean and Johnny, you guys know that on a web page, if you're going to sell something, you want the least amount of friction to buy this that you can create, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. So you want to minimize your friction. So between book 1 and book 2, how can you absolutely minimize any, and I mean, just take it all the way to the end. How can you minimize that there's 0 friction between book 1 and book 2?
Kidnap their families. I mean, that'll get a click fast. Like, I have your
Create
daughter.
spyware in the back of your book that automatically
No. Amazon
Free
is listening
Amazon
to all
gift cards.
No. God. Why don't you? So, what do we normally do with the trilogy? Book 1, book 2, book 3, and then we create a what out of it?
Like an omnibus, right?
Correct. Now flip it, Sean. Take the omnibus, release it first, put nothing in between them. There's no book 1, 2, and 3. Let's say they're 30 chapter books, 31 through 30, 31 through 60, 61 through 90. You release it as a book. The only friction you have between the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2 is turn the page. So at that point, you were back. Now, obviously, this is a KU play for all intents and purposes, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be focused on Kindle Unlimited for this to be the most effective for it to be. So you minimize that because you know that if you look at the statistics, your drop off, unless you kill a dog and or a love interest, is usually between book 1 and book 2. Okay, you're in a completely different genre, Dave. They're expecting you to do it. And I did the
What?
first
There's
one.
no dead dog in this book.
I want my
1
money
star.
back.
There are genres, subgenres, sub-subgenres, and then way the hell down there is Dave.
Yes.
David Wright wasted my time in this book. The last one had 4 dead dogs. This one, I waited till chapter 19 and it was just a broken leg.
He's a sellout.
And this is what I got the very first car, the time they picked me up and they took me to the Smarter Artist. My comment was, you guys are the same on your podcast as you are in a car. That was the aha moment for me, is like, y'all are exactly like this.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
We have no heirs whatsoever. Okay, let's talk KU wide because you know, there's a lot of people who have built entire businesses on KU, but I mean, you really have, and I think that was at our first summit is when you were like, you were on that. You're like, look, this is not dogma. let's
Yes.
talk. Let's have a conversation. So, how do you see in the last 5 years, how has that conversation changed, and how do you see it changing in the next 5 years? Do you think that KU is still going to be just as strong, or like you're somebody who looks for disruptions? What are the disruptions you see coming?
Right. So one of the things, a couple of years ago, it seems like every 18 months or so, year to 18 months, and I think you guys have a much longer history than I do, that it seems like something happens with Amazon that people freak out and the money train is ending and we all need to go to wide. Is that a fair statement, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or not even go to wide, but like, this is it. It's over. Like,
Yes.
Right. There's
Can't
a lot
sell
of
books anywhere.
a lot of whining
right.
without a solution.
Right.
It's over.
Yeah,
Party's over.
right. I actually hear the I'm going wide because I think authors get afraid. If I go wide, I'm already having these problems on Amazon. I'm going to be totally invisible everywhere. So it's almost like the sky is falling. I can't succeed as an author is more the thing I see.
So last week I wrote, it was the first time in a long time, I wrote a piece and dropped it off in 20 books about an article I was reading in 1980 that was released in the New York Times in 1982. I took a quote from it, which talked about the future is ruined, there's too many publishers. 1982, almost 40 years ago, in which you can guarantee it happened before then. And their thought, if you thought there was too many publishers in 1982, hold on to your hats now. And so I extrapolated from that, asking, okay, so what are the concerns? Because I keep seeing these things that pop up in my 5 years of indie. I don't see them all because I'm mostly off of social media now. But in going, it's like, oh my gosh, KU is screwed, we're going away. Oh my gosh, Amazon is getting rid of everybody for no good reason, it's going away. Oh my gosh, right? So, but here's a true thing I know. Some people cannot sell in KU for no good reason that we understand. There's no logical understanding of why it is, but it is. And it's kind of like gravity. We might not understand exactly how gravity works, but I guarantee you don't want to jump off the 3rd floor. So if that's the point, then wide is a very natural way. As a publisher, I also started to recognize that there were certain genres that actually played better, right? So Kindle Unlimited, sci-fi worked really well, especially in the beginning in romance, for the two reasons that sci-fi, you had people who loved new technology. Therefore, yes, I will buy a Kindle and see what this cool stuff is all about. And then you had romance, who was like, I need 2 to 3 books a day. And if my husband sees
They needed a
one book,
buffet, you know,
yeah,
a
yeah,
buffet and a brown paper bag.
which will be empty by tonight. And so because of that, I said, okay, we need to get more, and we can talk audio too. There's a whole audio discourse on this, but we need to get understanding of wide. And I'm not going to do it on the back of one of my collaborators and chance them. So it needs to be something I'm doing. So I have this thing called Opus X that I wanted to implement, and I'm looking at this going, okay, we're going to do 12 books. They're going to be Hollywood quality, New York done graphics. So I wanted covers and I wanted everything else that if you put it on a wall, you're like, what movie is that? No, it's not a movie. So when you look at the book covers, you will see that there are props on these models which came from Hollywood, 7 boxes of Hollywood props to help build these covers. We've done 3D art or 3D, multi-$1,000 3D models to be the ships that are part of this. And so the investment on this is well into 150,000+ on what we're doing so far. And I'm like, because we're going to go all in. It's a 12 book, 18-month, 1-story release, and we're going to learn what's going on. And I'm willing to put the figures into it to do it because I believe that you need to have the ability as a publisher, as separate from an indie author publisher. Indie author publisher has the maximum amount of books they can write. And that's going to slow down, except maybe Johnny. I learned how fast he wrote, I just wanted to go, I don't even understand how that.
I've slowed down. I don't know. You may be laughing right now.
No, well, is it still in excess of 83,000 words a month?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still a 7-figure word writer a year. Yeah, no, that shit's not happening with me. I'm sorry.
What is your word count per day? Just
mine?
Yeah.
It's different now because like if I have to do beats, which are typically 8,000 to 10,000 words, I'll try to get them done in 2 days. And then I try like hell not to have to write anything ever. I'm so burnt out on writing, but I still have to. That's still part of my talent. That's
so you
part
still
of
like designing the stories, so you'll do the beats,
yes.
But not really the rough draft.
No, not to if I can help it. No,
because you're the
I'm sorry, I'm the opposite of you. Did you say?
Yeah, I only want to do first drafts and none of the rest of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's funny. I
opposite.
did drafts for a long time and then I got burned out on it and then just did what Michael was with just beats and kind of producing stuff. And now I'm back to where I really like drafts and I've just been busy lately and I haven't been drafting as much and I really miss it. So I think I don't know, part of creative for me is I like doing the thing that I can't quite do right now. So,
nobody else in this company is that way.
it is what breaks us.
Who amongst you is the business? I mean, really business oriented.
Oh,
Sean.
Me.
He's the only one who's business.
I am allergic to business.
Yeah, me and Neve. So you haven't met Neve. She would have been on here, but she got a little sick. But she's totally business minded, very strategic, very long-term thinking, and she really likes the business. So it's fun to kind of brainstorm and put stuff together. And yeah, it was actually interesting today. I had to fill out the census for the company. And there was, by law, next week, I'm officially breaking the law if I didn't do it. So I did it this morning. And it was really interesting because for each of the partners, at the time of filling it out, which would have been me and Johnny and Dave, because it was asking for the years 2017 to 2019. And so I had to make a lot of assumptions for them because they weren't in my office this morning. And so, there's a whole section where it's asking your motivations. Why are you in this business? Why did you create this business? And it was really interesting to fill out what was important to me and then go and fill it out for Johnny, what was important for him, and then Dave. And it was really,
To watch the world burn.
It was all of my columns were pretty much all on the left. Like, this is very important to me. I like to create value. I like to make new things, you know, all of this stuff. I don't want to work for anybody else, blah, blah, blah. And then Johnny's were some on the left. I think I had one all the way on the right, and I don't even remember what it was. Johnny had some on the left, a few in the middle, and like one or two on the right. Dave's was almost all just a right-hand column. Like, I need job security, you know, lots of just it showed how different we are. And he had, I think, one in the middle.
I'm very risk averse.
Yeah, very risk averse. But I do like the business. I do like the risk. I do like doing things that haven't been done before. I like this industry a lot because it's not only really creative, but like, it is a place where real business can get done. And, you know, that's what kept me away from ever thinking that I would be a writer growing up, because it wasn't business. And I really like being creative, but I really like, you know, business too.
I like a lot of those things too, but Sean and I are almost parallel in different, like, we learned that we shouldn't be co-captaining a boat. It's more like he should have a boat and I should have a boat, and my boat's just me, like, just rowing by myself.
I'm on the iceberg.
Yeah. And we're kind of communicating like, hey, can I help you out over there? No, it's all good. So,
yeah. And I also realized, and this is why I was so drawn to working with Dave and then working with Johnny, and why we now have, you know, 20 people in the company. I'm just collaborative by nature. And it's very true when it comes to not just storytelling, but building a business. Like, I want other brains. I want other ideas. So what you're also missing is that it used to be me, Dave, and Johnny, but really me and Johnny, with Dave kind of like doing the things he absolutely needed to do. Now it's...
No, that came out in the podcast.
Yeah, right. And then there's...
Don't tell anyone.
But now we have a brain trust. Instead of it being kind of like me and Johnny running it, it's me and Neve are kind of running the company, but the brain trust is me, Neve, Johnny, Dave, and Bonnie. And we just all kind of, we have enough insight together to kind of make great collective decisions, I think.
Oh, that's cool. No, that's fantastic. You asked where do I see because it's one of those situations where we haven't actually spoken for so long that we could probably sit here and bore people to death.
Yeah, we should get an you should meet Neve, actually. We should do an off, we should get together and talk and catch up off camera.
Off camera,
audio, whatever.
So we can say stuff that we wouldn't be willing to say. Just lay it out there for everybody to understand forever.
Well, we did learn too. You know, we try to be as generous with our knowledge as possible, but that bit us in the ass hard. You know, it really did. And you know,
and I've taken your issues to heart. So yeah, so I'm like, yeah, well, if they ran into it, I should probably not do that.
Yeah, well, we're smarter.
Hey, let's screw up all of our also buts.
Well, we try to talk in generalities because I think
not even just to protect ourselves. I would argue. I would say that's the lesson. Would you agree with that? Like, there are no generalities that apply to everybody. So. Yes. It's not doing anybody any good.
No, it's not. And I think that the idea is you want to talk and you want to have these conversations. And if you are thinking in a business-minded way, then you're listening to these conversations and thinking, how does it apply to me? You don't need the names of specific books. You don't need to go look at their pages. You need to like take away the lessons from what they're saying.
Yeah, you guys have the training experience for years now, which I do not. And I recognize that I can get a question from you guys and I'll go off on one tangent. And then if there was another person here talking, they'd answer the question, be like, oh yeah, I knew that. I never went there, you know, because my mind will wander and go down something I glom on. So if Johnny had asked a 2-part question, I probably would have answered a third answer that he didn't ask. That was some weird amalgamation of the first 2 questions. 5 years from now, we are in one of the most interesting aspects of publishing ever. I made an effort to go back and start learning trad. Why are they the way they are? How did they get there? And so if you go back and read Mike Shatzkin, S-H-A-T-Z, Shatzkin, anyway, Shatzkin, You read his stuff from 2014, 15, 16. He put a bunch of blogs together and put books out. And then you find out about his dad, Leonard. Leonard Chatskin is one of the preeminent individuals to create compelling marketing and other efforts in the publishing industry, including, I believe he might have been the first person ever to bring statisticians into the effort of trying to market publishing. And so his book is called In Cold Type, and that is probably the only author and only book title I can effing remember. Otherwise, names and faces escape me. Get a copy of that. Read it if you're really curious. And you're going to find another one is related to a bookseller. The Rebel Bookseller, I think, is the name of the book. Do not remember the name. And you find out that a lot of the problems with books go back to the cold, between World War I, World War II, whenever they started the premise that you buy stuff on consignment effectively, and we'll take it back. And over time, they never changed that. And so no matter how I tried to figure out how to make book selling and bookstores work for me in the last 5 years, I never could. And I decided I never would. I would either break their model and just go do something completely new, or just not get into it because it makes no sense. But here's a common diatribe you hear in the indie area without acknowledging the true history. You think you're right. Trad publishers don't pay writers enough. Who here has heard that one? And they burn in effigy all the trad companies. Well, guess what? Why don't you go burn the booksellers who require 45 to 55% of the cover price? Go burn them.
Can I just delineate that a little bit, because people may not know this. So the way that books are sold traditionally to bookstores is, it's like Barnes and Noble, just to take an example. It's like they won't commit to, we're gonna go ahead and buy 50 of your books and sell 50 of your books. We'll take a gamble on you. It's more like
every other retail space,
right?
It's
it's like, can we take the gamble and get the upside, but have none of the risk? Can we just please do this in a way where we benefit, where we can't fail?
And we have plenty of trees, so if we need to pulp them, that's fine.
Right. And that's the other thing, is it's environmentally terrible, is they'll take the books and then, so let's say they're paperback books, which is much more usual than hardbacks at this point. And so if you have 50 paperback copies of your books, and then if they ordered 50, they sell 10, then after a certain amount of time, the bookseller arrangement allows them to go ahead and give back and get credit back for the 40 that they didn't sell. But because the shipping is such a pain in the ass and the books get beaten up and stuff, what they do almost every time is they rip off the cover, they send the covers back, and then they have these books that have no covers that are useless, and they just throw them away. They just pulp them. And so
Sandy, who used to work at Walden Books when I was a kid, used to save them for me, and I would sell them.
And you could do that sort of thing too. But the point is that the publishers have to build in such enormous margins, because they're just throwing money away, and they don't like to take risks on publishing books by unknown authors, because it's a huge risk to only them, not the author, not the book.
What you have is a really ineffective business model on all ends. And what we've done in the last few years is extremely disruptive. And that's, I think beyond the creation and the business of it all, I think that's what really excites people like Michael and myself, is that, we're in a period of churn. If you want to make difference, this is when you can do it. And that's very, very exciting.
So I interrupted you to explain that thing, but then you were going to say, so what's the finale of that story? How can we disrupt this, or how were you looking at it?
Well, I was going to say, what I was talking about was just the fact that a lot of people start throwing around accusations with ignorance and out of ignorance. I mean, I really appreciate you coming back to try to explain that core concept, but it wasn't until I understood what was going on, then you look at it and you go, okay, out of a cover price, typically 45 to 53% of that book cost goes to the bookseller. Then you get 15% for distribution costs on top of that. And then you look at cost of book, which honestly isn't that much comparative to the cover. And then you start, okay, so this is now the net potential profit. And the author was paid on the cover price, not what was left of the profit. So now, instead of being 12.5%, you might be looking at something that's 30, 40% of what's left over, not including the risk, right? And so one of the things that kind of irritated me is that people throw around all of these accusations against an industry that we owe. As a publisher of science fiction and urban fantasy, there wouldn't be those genres without those authors and those companies that created a desire for them before me. And
Right.
so anyway, it's just one of those things that I feel like too often there's just too many things that are going on, and it's like, learn how you can do better. Stop telling someone else how they can do better.
Just to clarify that last bit, because I didn't mention this specifically, is what Michael's talking about with the reduction is like, let's say you have a book that sells for $10. That's the price on the cover. The bookseller will only pay something like $4 for it. They want like a 60% reduction. So there's another huge margin thing. So how do you think, so you were talking about the future. So do you think that model is going to kind of go away? You talked about researching trad. Was it sort of to have a respect for the background, or because we can disrupt it?
In effect, you cannot compete against that which you don't know. And it was me saying, okay, books, everyone's like, hey, you know what, paper is going away. Well, we've traveled the world. We've been to Frankfurt Book Fair multiple times. We've been to London. We've been to China twice. We were planning on going again this year. So as a publisher, I felt it was our responsibility to really get out there and understand you create relationships that you cannot mimic any other way. No one as far as I know, no one in the indie publishing sphere, if they go into a conversation and they say, what books, where have you been in the world for book fairs? And if LMBPN is there, it's like, well, we've been to Frankfurt 3 times. We've been to London 2.5, if you include this year's half. We've been to BEA. We've been to China. And that's the kicker. People are like, yeah, I've been to Frankfurt. Yeah, I've been to London. Wait, China? Yeah, haven't you been to China? Well, why not? It's one of the biggest English-speaking countries. Are you trying to think about the long-term efforts of China? And it's going to take long-term. We have one of our books, Opus, in a Chinese store through Publish Drive, but how many people know that you can get into the Chinese stores potentially through Publish Drive? If you don't, well, maybe, and it's important to you, go take a look. There's a third-hand story of a lady who is out of UK. She was doing okay. She was selling pretty good. A few thousand here, maybe 10,000. She is asked to come to China. So she goes, not thinking much. She arrives and sees there is a line just down the street. She was selling hundreds of thousands of books in China.
Wow, that's cool.
And didn't know it. So it's one of those things, is like, you talk about a bestseller. There's no bestseller that is generally going to compete with a bestseller out of China if you can do it. And it's hard barrier to entry. But once you get it, there's precious few of us that'll be there.
I've just started my new book. It's called China's the Best.
Be careful, you're going to get deported out of this country.
I know. It's dangerous.
And if you're going to sell in a market like China too, you need to have some awareness of what's going on. I can't remember. I think it was India that people were talking about, and it's the pricing structure is entirely different there. And if you don't know that, and they're usually dealing with paperback books, I don't know if that's true in China.
No, it's not even remotely true. China is very technologically advanced. They have, if you take the science fiction readership of the biggest English-speaking science fiction magazines that have been around, it's still smaller than the one that is in China.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
Now, is the censorship for print the same as it is for movies?
There's a little bit, but quite frankly, think of a human being in America when they say, I want to get around, or at least step gently beside a law. Would Americans do that? Would Europeans do that? Guess what? Chinese do it too. And that's where, if you go visit the countries, you find out, and I'm not trying to make this a political rant, it's just something I noticed as traveling around the world the last 5 years, that there is so much misinformation directed at the people in a country by those in the country to keep them at odds with people in another country.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about like, I know, like, video game creators in movies, sometimes you have to adjust the content in order to be approved to go into the country. I didn't know if that was the same for books as well.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 core companies that you have the ability to go through. And that's where I was saying Publish Drive already has that relationship. So we got approved to be into China strictly because of Publish Drive. Now, we intend to do some other stuff that we've done now. I mean, we're a relatively major effort now in Germany. We've got 34 or 35 titles out now, and we're releasing them at the rate of anywhere from 2 to 6 a month. So, we'll have another 15, 20 by the end of the year. And, our goal is to be at 3 to 4 a month translated. We are translating at almost the speed of our writing, which is
Are you
almost unheard of.
translating into Chinese, or you're just selling the American versions or English versions?
Right now, strictly English. The
Right.
challenge with Chinese is, and the challenge of even doing this in German, is you do need native English or native speakers in that one. And there are 2 different core Chinese languages that you have to worry about. So do you either go Mandarin or whatever the other one is?
Cantonese.
Cantonese.
Thank you, guys. I should have made that. And so pop quiz, what's the other one? Perfect.
Next time.
Yes.
Okay, well, before we close down, I feel like I need to ask Bonnie if there's anything she wants to say.
Oh, Bonnie's here. Hi, Bonnie.
She's so quiet, and I know she's thought of at least 9 wonderful questions, and so I don't want to close down without passing the mic.
Or putting her on the spot to come up with 9 questions.
Oh, she'll just do 1 or 2 or 3 or however many she wants. Bonnie won't feel obligated to do 9. But Bonnie, do you have anything that you've been wondering?
Yes, actually, I was really fascinated by what you were saying about how beta readers play into your editorial process. And I had a really interesting conversation with Krishan a couple of years ago about some of the challenges that you guys were facing in terms of editing and just kind of scaling that whole process up. And I was just wondering, do you have any lessons learned that you would share for someone who maybe is just starting to scale up their collaborations, like ways that you streamlined your editorial process or how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so we implemented a beta. So, well, here's the thing. We have a constant effort between editory and production. Production wants it finished and out and selling and income. Editing wants time to do it right, do it without being stressed out. And so we're at loggerheads. And so what our no man's land at the moment is a brand new series gets 3 weeks from finish to selling. That's 1 week of beta, whose purpose is to go in and just look at story. Do we have plot holes? Do we have mistakes? Do we have anything like that? And then that team gives it back to the author, and the author does whatever they want. Now, one thing that's good to know about me, and Johnny, I'd be curious on yours, because you'd mentioned about being a rough draft person. So I don't know if this is what you meant. When I write a story, when I hit the end, I'm done. I don't want to look at that story a second time or a third, or God forbid, a fourth. So I don't
Johnny
want
feels
to
you.
So when I engaged with Lynn Stigler years ago, and Lynn had experience editing for Baen Books, someone might recognize that name. So what I had in the very beginning is I asked her, do it, and she did it like she would normally do, which is I'm going to edit everything and let you have it, and you can approve or disapprove. And I'm like, hell's to the no. So I went through it, and I said, okay, out of these 150 changes, I might have had a trouble with 1, maybe 2. Here's the new rule. You can give me that document, but unless there's something you think I should look at, accept them all and keep moving. So that was me as an author, minimizing the amount of time, because I came to an agreement with an editor that worked with me. And I've had conversations with Lynn where she and others on the team love this, because they feel less like they're a machine going, this is inappropriate, this is how you need to do it, and more like they're part of the creative process. It takes a certain kind of author to be okay, because that's their baby. I've never felt that way. This is the story I want to tell. This is what I have going on. You're not really going to materially affect it. And I don't want to fucking look at it again. I don't remember what the classification on GPG is on this particular podcast. With you guys, probably X.
Oh, no, we
Triple
curse like
X.
crazy.
And so that's a step, Bunny, where I set up an agreement with an editor that I paired with well. That's important. I paired with well. But so now the new ones get a week of beta. Guess where that week of beta goes to if it's one of my books? Does it come to me? Yeah, it goes to the editor. The editor fixes everything that she thinks she can fix, knowing me, because we talk story. And if not, she'll bring me only the things that she's like, I need you to fix, or look at this, or give me direction. If I don't see anything, it now went to JIT. Just-in-time reading means it's post-edit. Beta was pre-edit. Post-edit, and they go through trying to find any mistakes editing missed. Once that's done, we have an amazing amount of high quality books where we never ever get a notice from Amazon that there was a mistake in it. We got one like a month ago, and we're all looking around like, the hell is this? We never get edits. We're perfect. Well, no, we weren't, obviously, but we had gone so long, whereas in the beginning, don't even ask me, daily, hey, here's a mistake. Well, that's because I was editing. There you go. So that's kind of it. And then if the betas didn't find any mistakes in book 1, we typically will skip beta book 2, assuming that we have continuity of what's going on. And if JIT, and some betas are in JIT, so you have cross-contamination amongst resources there. But if they don't find it, then JIT does it. Editing usually is not paying attention to the story. They're there to fix the words. And so they don't keep all of these things in their head. But if JIT finds it, then we're like, okay, this is back on a 3-week schedule. And so those 3 weeks then get placed in it and move forward from there. Did that help your?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One question, Sean, you oversold this.
She'll think and have a bunch more for when we talk to you later, I think.
She will. There'll be a stack.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, Michael, for being on. It is always good to talk to you, regardless of the fact that we're recording and stuff. It's been too long. It's probably been since, I don't know, very long time. But yeah, thanks for being on. Great information as always. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the next few years and see whether you're right again. So thanks everybody for listening.
He's taking that as a challenge.
Anything that you want to let people know, where to find you, that sort of thing?
I mean, we're completely a fiction company. I personally have no nonfiction. I think, eventually I could see that it could happen, but it would be one of those things of, let me just write this down, because let's face it, you guys, certainly before us, wrote one of the most compelling books to bring tens of thousands of people into this industry.
The Bible.
That's right. That's right. Damn right, the Bible. And I think that we probably have some things that we could and should put down to posterity of how did we change publishing. I didn't set out to change publishing. I don't think you guys set out to do it, but you came at it from such a unique perspective, and business and marketing and just the creative, newsletters that, we took it by storm. And then to answer the question, next 5 years, just recognize that whole thing that we talked about, where the books stores and how all of that infrastructure has been put in place over 100 years and has momentum, just broke. And so now everything, and those companies are forced to understand how POD brings them together. It's going to lower their distribution costs, their warehousing costs, just in time publishing. They're going to lose it a little bit on profitability because POD costs a lot more. Ingram's a $1 billion company. They just opened something in Australia, another place in Australia. Just pay attention to what's going on. And rumor is that many of those trad people are coming into KU now. So now everyone's like, oh my God, KU, trad, and everyone's going to eat up all the KU. Well, we saw that already. Did anyone notice how low KU went about 3 or 4 months ago when Amazon just dumped a bunch of free KU on that? So, don't stress out. Here's the thing. There's only a certain number of books per month that actually make money. All of the rest of them, where it's 4 million, 8 million, or 80 million, they're not making money because it requires you to build an audience and advertise, and most people won't. And TradPub absolutely cannot do advertising for the 25 or 50,000 books they have in their backlist. So just take a step back, take a deep breath, don't listen to the hype, or don't even get on social media in the first place and you won't hear about it, and take another step forward.
And then jump right off the cliff.
All right, excellent. Well, so thanks everybody for being. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for being on, and we'll see y'all next time for the next episode of the Story Studio Podcast.
Thank you guys.
See ya.
Thanks so much, Michael. Adios.
And buddy.